America, my name is Emile Osei-Frimpong, and today we're going to talk a little bit more about Rousseau's Emile. I just finished it. It's got 5 books, and book 5 is on Emile. That's the young boy who Rousseau is charged with educating and cultivating. Is now a young man and is a suitor and is looking for an appropriate mate. And so book 5 is about the education of Sophie. That's Rousseau's partner for Emile and what her education looked like. And apparently Sophie, he wanted to say Sophie's just a generic girl. And he hypothesized that her parents came from money and esteem, but for some reason lost all that money and esteem and now just had each other. And since they didn't marry for money and esteem, but they happen to have had it, they have culture, but no money or no public estimation. So they're just regular country folk. And this is important because he wants Sophie to understand that her character and her partners in life and the most important people in her life do not need to be materially wealthy or be socially esteemed too much, right? So it's important that Sophie, the daughter, does not marry for money and does not marry for social reasons, but marries out of love for her partner's character. And this does a lot of work for Rousseau. And so for the first 3 books, we learn about the education of Emile. And Rousseau's a curmudgeon, but a curmudgeon in a way that I kind of appreciate, because he's one of those guys who would say, like, no, kids need to actually play like in nature with things, not just worry about, I don't know, the opinions of other people. And he, like me, would be anti-screens and all of that stuff. And kids need to actually like play and make judgments based on making things and building things. And that's a great thing. And being self-sufficient and being able to do things that are hard and a little bit dangerous, but not too dangerous because it's just nature anyway. So that's Rousseau in the first 3 books, and I appreciate it. 4th book is about the religious education, which I think is kind of dicey. And then the 5th book is about the education of Sophie, Rousseau's mate. And this is where Rousseau and I, his curmudgeonly ways, actually differ from mine, but tell us a lot about the modern Democrats, right? So for Rousseau, girls are naturally indisposed, they're naturally not very good at reasoning, but they have ethical taste and sensibility and aesthetics, right? So they do the right things, but not for the right reason necessarily, and can't trust their reasoning and judgment, but they can be they're naturally disposed to be cultivated into having a quality of moral taste, which is as the equal of men who can be cultivated into making qualitative judgments. And so this is Rousseau's kind of natural inequality. I don't believe that. I think women can do anything with the mind that I can do. And I'm not the smartest guy, so maybe that's just an accident that everything I can do, I've met girls who can do it, but then don't. Or I've met people who can do it, but then don't. And I don't think this is a gendered quality. As everything, both intellectually and most things physically, actually, especially in my old age, the women can do as well as I can do. And I do think there should be like a gender difference in youth sports after puberty. That makes sense to me. And like young people's sports when they're in their 20s, professional athletes, that makes sense. But I don't think that they are, disposed to be ridiculous. And I don't think men are necessarily supposed to be reasonable. I think there are other cultural, historical reasons why this is the case in the West. Right? So Rousseau, he's a Swiss/French, Swiss from Geneva. And you have to understand that, he still kind of has, in my estimation, a white colonist mentality with respect to this. And so his gender ideals are not non-ideal in my estimation. But his curmudgeonly ways will tell you that, like, look, women have authority over the world. They're empresses over the world by making their husbands do what the women want them to do. That's how they rule the world. And that is appropriate. And they do it by taste. So it's most appropriate. It is most appropriate that we teach girls how to have good ethical taste, that they're, modest and charming and pleasing, and they're the kind of women who could get men to demand the women do what the women already wanted to do. Right? And who are attracted to men by their character, not necessarily their money or their popular esteem. So men live to be independent for Rousseau and retain like a natural independence that they had, although that's historically dicey because they all had parents. And women live to be morally dependent on good men. And that is an asymmetry that we think we've gotten rid of in late modernity, but we really haven't. It's just women have found a way to play both sides, right? So they get the authority of getting men to do what they want and the authority of actually being able to do what they want. So it's kind of a fascinating, and the authority of taste so that they don't have to be accountable to public reason. Think about Kamala Harris's campaign. She did not have to give arguments. She did not have to give arguments for her policy. It was beneath her to give arguments for her policy. And not in the same way that like you even got with Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump. It was just like Hillary Clinton's a wonk, right? If you want an argument for her policy, she'll give you the argument. Kamala Harris, if you asked her for an argument, you were just misogynist, or sexist, or she thought it was beneath her to have to actually make the case. And this is something for a prosecutor. Make the case for policy. Right? She just wanted it to like kind of spring out of her mind like like a bird, just untethered by reason. And that was supposed to be good enough for us. Right? And when it was asked what she would do differently than Joe Biden, she didn't have any thoughts at all because she's not supposed to think. She's just supposed to kind of be inspirational. And Black Girl Magic was supposed to rule the land. And that is a bunch of crap because people want arguments for for the policies that are supposed to govern the whole, not just, think that they're magical. And Black girls are not magical. They're just people. That means they have to give reasons for the policies they want to enforce on everybody else, which is I have daughters who are Black girls and they have to give reasons for what they want to do. It's not just, they don't count on magic. You got to work and give reasons that are publicly accountable like everybody else, right? But for Rousseau, he thinks women shouldn't have to give reasons and they're bad at reasoning anyway, or just not as good and not as worthwhile. So they can have moral tastes. They should have sensibilities and well-cultivated sensibilities, and it's the purpose of your parents to cultivate in their daughters a quality of moral sensibility so that they don't have to necessarily think and reason, but they can just kind of, as a matter of taste, be attracted to the right kind of guy. And this is important because if as a matter of taste, they're not attracted to the right kind of guy, they don't develop a quality of moral sensibility, not necessarily reasoning, but a moral sensibility, what will happen is they'll succumb to flatterers or be suborned by charlatans. So they have to have the kind of taste to be disgusted by disgusting people. And they can go into cities and see all of the vices and, have a wild time kind of, but then ultimately get bored and disgusted by that life and go back to the country where they belong and pine for a worthy man who's not going to woo them with money or esteem, but with the quality of his character. Right? And so this lives on in kind of how we think about gender, even among liberals, and maybe even especially on liberals, that women don't think they should have to give arguments. They think their taste is enough. Their lived experience is enough. And their taste, and to give an argument for a policy is beneath them. And this is ultimately what's going to doom Democrats. Because insofar as this class is ascendant and dominant in the power brokers within the party, they don't think that they should have to give arguments because their class sensibilities and like moral sensibilities are already aligned with like the donors of their dads and often their husbands. They don't think they should have to give arguments for their priorities or the content of their politics, the political priorities or the content of their politics. Then the right is going to continue to outflank them. because the right will hash this out. You got the Elon Musk of the right and the Mitt Romney of the right, and you got all sorts of members of the right who are all like prominently placed in the and J.D. Vance, and not the same guy. These are like different camps, importantly different camps. And and Steve Bannon, these are all people. Elon Musk, Steve Bannon, and Mitt Romney do not all necessarily get along and do not all draw from the same people, but they have a home for the right because they can the right's willing to hash out the arguments. The left, either you have the right taste or you're out. They don't like Donald Trump, not because of his tariffs, not because of the price of eggs or anything like that. They don't like him because he uses the wrong fork. They don't like him. They don't like Trump because he's gauche. They don't like him because he's cruel. And that's different. And this is why you can't have a robust left kind of media ecosystem, because they can't actually contest ideas. Not in a responsible way. Either you're with the program or you get canceled. It's hard to get canceled from the right. But from the liberal left, it's pretty easy. It's pretty easy. And I think that is unfortunate, but all a matter of thinking that politics come down to taste. And why do we think that politics comes down to a matter of taste? Well, because of the feminists. I'll say it. And it's because of these antiquated gender ideals that they don't know that they bring in. But yet, nevertheless, they bring into politics. They bring into politics that their taste is enough. That political tastes are enough, and you shouldn't have to bring argument. And where can you find the root of that? You can find the root of that from a naturalized morality that you see in Rousseau, where he's worried about his biggest worry is civil society, market-based civil society, distorting women's taste. Not distorting their reason, distorting their taste, because they should only have to be accountable to their taste. And the idea that women should only have to be accountable to their political tastes still lives on in the American Democratic Party, which is the reason nobody wants to deal with women in the Democratic Party. I call them well-credentialed dingbats who go on about their first-person testimonies or lived experiences, but can't not bring themselves deign to recognize a good argument or even data if it doesn't match their taste. These people are gauche, and once they get a little bit of power, they're also very punitive. Once they get a little bit of power, they're also very punitive. If someone goes against their taste, that means they're wrong, and they can be punished. and these people, once they get power, they'll screw up your jobs. They like and do it with without any hint of due process. They're just as bad at due process as the punitive right, just less cruel about it explicitly. Implicitly, they're cruel, and in their own little cabals, covens, as you will, they were just as cruel at wielding power without a sense of due process or equality before the law. By the way, my entire name is Irami Osei-Frimpong. Once again, that's Irami Osei-Frimpong if you're wanting to know. And if you appreciate the quality of wisdom that I dispense once or twice a week, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. Because nobody, especially on the left, is going to talk like this because they're scared of these power brokers. Because to be black, especially a straight black male on the left, you have to say what they want you to say. But I am not saying what they want me to say. I'm saying what I think you need to hear. So it's weird. I'm in this position where, since I don't believe Israel has a right to be a state, because I don't think states, ethno-states are particularly good, it doesn't have a right to be a Jewish state. It can be a state, but it can be a state maybe like Hungary, preferably like the United States, or what makes the United States good. Like you just need to be a republic, a democratic republic that actually accepts equality of yeah. Anyway, so it accepts equality of religious pluralism that doesn't precludes it being a ethno state, a religious ethno state, right? So so you got some people, some Zionists who are going to call me a misogynist because I'm not a feminist, and then you have some feminists who are going to call me anti-Semitic because I'm not a Zionist, and so they it's kind of like that there was a murder movie. Maybe it's, I've never actually seen the original, but I've seen a few of the remakes where everybody gets everybody else to do the dirty work. So everyone has an alibi. and nobody's hands are dirty. In chat, think about the murder movie I'm talking about, where it's famous for like people hiring other people to do the dirty work. Not crimes and misdemeanors, but it's people hiring other people to do the dirty work, so it gives a dual alibi for everyone. I think they kill each other's wives. One person kills the other person's wife, and the other person kills the other person's wife, and that way they're both free. And this is what the Zionists and the feminists are doing. The Zionists have agreed to call me misogynist, and the feminists have agreed to call me anti-Semitic. That way I get tarred on by both camps, but nobody has blood on their hands, as it were. And that's just because, one, I do not believe Israel has a right to be a state, just a Jewish state. I think it's got, I believe in states. I think nation states are important, but not ethno-states. And then on the other hand, I think feminism brings in this quality of presumed political taste that undermines the need for argument. So you don't have to make an argument. You don't have to make an argument, even if you're running for president. You don't have to argue for your policies. You could just present yourself as pleasing. You could present yourself as pleasing, and that should be enough. So yeah, Rousseau goes into this in book 5 of Emile. He talks about how women's greatest virtue is their ethical taste and their power over men, and the authority makes them empresses of the world is that with a nod, if they have a quality of bearing and are so pleasing, they can get people to, do all sorts of things, run to the end of the earth and win wars and all of that stuff. Right. And that is the virtue and the political virtue of women. They could do it for the good. Right. And so the idea is that if you have daughters, according to Rousseau, not according to me, you should train them in this quality of political taste so that they both seek and inspire the best rationality of men. So what happens is that the husband who has formal authority of them demands of them what the women already wants to do. Right? So that's how Rousseau argues that women really rule the world but de jure, men do. But there's the great scene in Emile where the suitor, realizes that in order to woo Sophie, it's not enough to woo Sophie herself, or it's not just that he has to woo Sophie and woo her father through reason, because Sophie's being a little coquette, not being a little bit sly about whether she likes him or not. And so he's like, well, I can just get the approval of the father, and if the daughter likes me a little bit and the father really approves to me, I'm good. And then he realizes that actually it's not up to the father at all. It's not up to the father at all. It's and Rousseau's very clear to that because he's a modern. It's 100% up to Sophie. And that's when Emile, the suitor, freaks out and really expresses his vulnerability because Sophie's being kind of impassive. But she really likes him. She's just not showing it as much. And so he's just he doesn't know the course of his life. And he can't reason for it because it's not as if he can reason with Sophie because her virtue is not in her reasoning, it's in her taste. So his whole course of life is now up to the taste of Sophie, which is kind of like how Democrats were during the pandemic. Or how people were during the pandemic, in democratic governance. You can't give people reasons. You can't give these Democrats reasons for shutting down their business. You just have to depend on their taste. And they weren't going to give you reasons about how it's okay to shut down your livelihood. You just had to depend on their good taste. And it turns out that maybe they didn't have good taste. Right? So Emile realizes that his whole life course is up to Sophie's taste. And Sophie is not forthcoming on whether she likes him or not. Or she seems to like him, but isn't really clear that she does. And so he feels his vulnerability in a keen way. In a keen way, when he realizes that like reason doesn't purchase anything with Sophie because he can't go through her father at all. And, you know, it works out because Sophie's got great taste in guys and he's got a great character that she is in love with. And of course, he's pleased with her. And Rousseau also he goes on a wonderful tirade against corsets and makeup, although he's okay with rouge. And it's funny because that actually parallels the first part of the Emile, where he goes on a horrible tirade against medicine, but he's okay with hygiene. It's good with hygiene. Hygiene's very important. So he hates corsets and hates makeup, but he's okay with a little bit of rouge. And Sophie and Emile is completely vulnerable to Sophie's taste, right? And that's how I think we are with the Democratic Party. We are completely beholden to the tastes of like some rather awful feminists. They have like some policies are okay, but like for the most part, they're indifferent to in labor politics, and they won't be talked out of their indifference. They won't be reasoned out of their indifference because their political priorities aren't a matter of reason. They're a matter of their cultivated tastes and entitled to be so. So it's not as if they're a matter of their cultivated tastes and they're humble about it. The problem is, like, Democratic politics is a matter of the feminists' cultivated tastes, and they're not humble about it just being a matter of taste. They're proudly immune to reason and reasoning. And that is a little bit horrible. So not only are you wrong, you're immune to reason, so people are just leaving the Democratic Party. They're not necessarily becoming Republicans, but nobody wants to deal with people who with ideologues who are immune to both empirical data and the reasoned argument. Nobody wants to deal with that. And so they are politically homeless, and the Republicans will keep winning because at least they're willing to have the argument. So that is what Rousseau can tell you about the modern Democratic Party and its problems, right? You would think that this sensibility would completely leave us, but it's actually part of our history, and it needs to be excavated in the Western notions of womanhood, that their political taste, not reasoning, taste, has some sort of authority and legitimacy, right? So, by the way, if you appreciate what I'm saying, go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com. I haven't heard this argument anywhere else, because usually people read Book 5 of Rousseau and they just think, oh, this guy's a misogynist. And it's true in my view, but not as useless as you would think, right? So I'm one of those guys who think women can do reasoning-wise. The mental capacities of women are the same as the mental capacities of men, which means that they need to be accountable for their public offices in the same way we should hold men accountable for those same public offices. But Rousseau is not. And you know who else is not? The feminists who think, believe women. Believe all women, as if women are not as perfidious as men. And are not as susceptible to taking advantage of whatever edges they may have as men are. So I think they're just as honest and perfidious, except less accountable than their male counterparts. And that's a problem. They should be equally accountable. All right. Thank you for your time. I appreciate you spending the time to think with me and try to draw the line between Rousseau's sexism and the current misandry or just vapid politics of American Democrats. That I think that's a line that people haven't described, and you're getting it here, and you're welcome. Go ahead and go to www.funkyacademic.com and kick in $5, $15, or $50 a month. And I'll give you even a more practical example, not just of a political example. This idea that women have taste and they don't have to give reasons allows for so much bad parenting on the guise of mothering, an incredible amount of bad parenting. Because you actually need to be pretty rational to be a good parent now, because like this is a complex society. So you need to actually think through the decisions you make. But a lot of these women don't think they should have to think. So they end up being bad parents because they're going with their gut and assume that their cultivated taste is enough, but they don't have reasons for the decisions they make. And then when they screw up their kid, they just go and get a diagnosis for their kid. They'll pay some judge to tell them that it's a chemical imbalance rather, as opposed to bad parenting. Maybe you shouldn't have given your kid the phone so much. Maybe you should have actually spent more time with them. Maybe you should have learned with them. Maybe you shouldn't have expected other people to raise them or teach them. And you should have actually learned yourself and actually worked with them. But we can't tell mothers that, because if their taste doesn't agree, then we just have to assume that, their taste has authority, which I don't. And I get in a lot of trouble for not assuming that women's taste have authority. So once again, if you appreciate what I do and say, which I think you should, because not everybody's doing this, go to www.funkyacademic.com, kick in $5, $15, $50 a month, and I'll keep reading and telling you what I think about what I read. Peace.